Hey, everybody. So, chapter one in the textbook, we're looking at pages 1 through 14. All right. And what we're really dealing with here is an introduction to rhetoric. So, the importance of rhetoric is that it's described as sort of the available means that we have as humans to persuade people. And frankly, human as a category has been defined by rhetoric since Plato and Aristotle. Okay, and one of the reasons this book goes back to Plato and Aristotle is to sort of remind us that 2,500 years ago, people were sort of dealing with the same issues that we have. How do we communicate to each other in order to convey what we want them to hear, in order to kind of get what we want them to do, perhaps? Um, and we think about that in a few different ways. All right. At the end of this chapter on page 14, we'll start with the ending, because why not? There's three appeals that Aristotle talked about, right? Ethos, pathos, and logos. Some of you may have heard of these before. Ethos is I want to use my credibility or associate myself with the credibility of someone else in order to get people to trust me. And when people trust you, they listen to you. And when they listen to you, you might be able to get them to do something that you want to get them to do. So when a politician is able to get people to say, I like that guy or gal, I'd really like to have a beer with them. Having a beer with somebody, in a way, is really not that indicative of how well they do at a job. However, all that means is I like them. I trust them. I want them to be close to me. Ethos. Okay. Ethos also communicates itself in terms of, like, if you think about our advertising society, if you see that weird little thing, well, I'm not doing a very good job of drawing it, but the Nike swoosh. If you see that, you go Nike. That's ethos. That symbol has such credibility, although a Nike swoosh credibility is different than the credibility of Martin Luther King, for example, or Mother Teresa, or somebody who's really doing good work. But still, we recognize that because it has been so ingrained in our culture. That's indicative of that symbol's ethos. As writers, our ethos is maintained in a few ways. One, we very simply follow the protocol of whatever we're trying to write. So you don't text your grandmother in weird text speak and say a bunch of offensive stuff to her, or like crack a bunch of kind of raw jokes. I mean, maybe you have a different relationship with your grandmother than I did, but you're mindful of your grandmother when you're talking to her. That helps your ethos. You want grandma to think you're cool and you're a good kid, not like a dirtbag. Okay? That's how you work on your ethos. You write cleanly. You write with an appropriate tone. You seem to know what you're talking about. You cite good sources, credible sources. You don't cite crazy conspiracy theories to prove a point. People will go, well, that person's nuts. And the fact that you're citing them must mean you're nuts too. Okay? Ethos. That's a rough overview of ethos. Logos. Logic. Um, which air compressor do I want to buy? Well, how much does it cost? How many pounds per square inch do I get? How efficient is it? Will it accomplish the goals that I need to accomplish for my thing? Logical, not a lot of emotion or credibility in that, in the sense that it's just a logical analysis of what's going on. Facts, figures, stats, but also logos can be thought of as like the logic of the argument that you make. So if you want to think back to when you were a kid and you were young and maybe you wanted to go stay over at a buddy's house, and you're trying to convince your parents to let you do it, or whoever, whoever's letting you go where you're going, you're talking to that person. I want to go stay over at Scotty's place. Okay, what did you do? Hey, I've been cleaning my room. I haven't gotten in trouble doing that thing I always do in a while. We're actually going to do a little homework before we do X, Y, and Z. We got to work on a school project. That's a logical argument, because you start by laying out your point and then you provide relevant things to help convince your parents. So logic is not just facts and figures. Logic is that you're logically thinking about how to put your points in order so that they communicate what you want them to communicate. In this case, I want to go stay at Scotty's tonight. Okay. Pathos, emotion. How you make people feel. If you make them feel sad, does that get them to do something? If you scare them, does that get them to do something? If you inspire them, does that get them to do something? If you make them laugh, does that get them to do something? If you make them sexually excited, does that get them to do something? Emotions, right? One of the things I like to think about with ethos and logos is, let's say we're talking about cutting down trees in the rainforest. A logical argument for that might, to not do that, might mean, well, for every acre of trees, X amount of carbon dioxide that we cut down, X amount more carbon dioxide goes into the atmosphere, and the more that goes up, the planet's temperature rises by this amount. When the planet's temperature rises by this amount, the ocean temperatures rise to this amount. And when that happens, the polar caps melt. And when that happens, there's more water in the sea, which actually makes all this stuff start happening faster, which means that water is going to come up and take over your cities. That's a logical argument. An emotional argument might be to find a little cute, furry forest dweller, big eyes, furry, cute, that lives where you cut down trees in the rainforest, and show a picture of it to an audience, and they go, oh my God, cute, look at that cute, furry forest dweller. And then you show a picture of a bulldozer that has run over one of those, and it's just smushed. And then people go, oh my God, when we chop down the rainforest, we kill that furry forest dweller. I can't stand for that. I'm getting involved, right? That's an emotional response. You want to protect the cute furry forest dweller. So all of them are important. Another thing down here at the bottom is kairos. Okay, kairos is a Greek word meaning understanding the moment. This is important. You need to know the time, when it is, the place, where it is, okay, the audience, who you're talking to, and the topic. So I'm going to give you an example that's been in the news lately. New Orleans is removing Confederate statues from the city. Okay, highly controversial. The time, now. Why is it important now? Well, we're still dealing with racial issues. We've got Black Lives Matter. We've got cops killing folks. We got folks killing cops, okay? We had our first African-American president before that made a lot of people go crazy, and it also made a lot of people very inspired and proud. Our current president takes a different take towards, is much more openly critical about certain racial issues, right? We're still dealing with the Civil War. I'm a Yankee. I'm from Illinois, right? I lived in California. Moving to the South, I never realized that the Civil War was still going on, basically. When you lose a war, you have a different take on it than when you win a war. When you win a war, it just goes into the past. When you lose a war, you hang on to it forever, right? And that's just a different time. So time and place. Those Confederate statues being taken down, people in New York go, well, duh, why wouldn't you do that? People in New Orleans, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Virginia, they have a different take on it. So place matters. The audience, the Confederate thing is, the audience is very clear. White folks like to say that it's a part of history, and black folks see it as indicative of a horrible time of lynching and oppression, right? Depending on who you're talking to, that's a different audience. And, the topic is the Confederate statues. So kairos is a really way to look at the situation and sort of figure out that this thing isn't just a thing. It's a thing that means something different based on where it is, when it is, and who's talking about it. This is rhetoric, okay? This is the general gist of rhetoric. And why we're starting here is, in order for you to write better, you have to get better at understanding rhetorical situations all around you and in reading them. So for the assignment for this, there's that article on Columbusing, right? That short article on the art of discovering something that is not new. And I'm having you look at activity 1.4 on 11. And why I'm asking you to do this is so you can practice looking at somebody's argument. The other thing here is, you're in college, okay? You got classmates that are going to be on different sides of a lot of these issues. That's okay. If you read something here that you don't agree with, I'm not trying to get you to think a certain way. I'm trying to get you to think. So please don't ever infer that I have some agenda that I'm trying to get you to follow. You have a right to think whatever you want, but you need to learn how to logically support it, how to consider your audience when you're talking about it. If you start talking about something and you offend the hell out of your audience without being aware of that, they're going to stop listening to you. There's a thing now going on where people are really concerned about political correctness, that we're being too politically correct, okay? And sometimes when somebody says something offensive, they say, well, these people are trying to get me to stop saying what I want to say. That is not true. You can say whatever you want to say. You have an American right to do that, okay? Don't believe the hype. Nobody's trying to silence anyone. But when you say what you say, and you don't consider when you're saying it, you don't consider where you're saying it, you don't consider who you're saying it to, you cannot control the way people respond to you. You can say whatever you want. You have the freedom to do that. You do not have the freedom to tell somebody else how to take what you said. Freedom is a word that people like to throw around now that basically means I want to do exactly what I want to do, and I'm pissed off that nobody else understands that. That has nothing to do with what freedom is. Freedom is recognizing that you have a right to do what you want to do, and so does everybody else. And in between there is a negotiation. Freedom is not some objective thing that you just get freedom. Freedom is not really as free as we think it is. Real freedom is much more of a compromise and much more of an understanding of both what we need and what others need. Okay, so I want you to think about all of that as you're reading through this chapter closely. I'm only assigning 14 pages. Read it a couple times, okay? Make sure you understand the general foundation of the way we're going to approach texts in class and the way we want to think about when we read something. How am I believing what this person is saying because I just trust them? And why do I trust them? Maybe they look like me. Maybe they sound like me. Maybe they have the same cultural experiences that I have. Then you might think as you get a little older, just because they look like me and sound like me and have the same cultural experiences with me, is that enough to really trust them? What happens in your life is sometimes you start trusting people that have nothing to do with you from where you're from because they have better things to say. Straight up. Okay. So you want to think about who they are. You want to think about their logic. Are they making sense? Are they citing things that are logical? Are they talking to you in an order that is logical? I met a guy the other night out at a brewery in Atlanta, and we were talking about something I forget, and this guy started talking, and he was smart. I mean, words were coming out of his mouth. He seemed bright, but after 10 minutes, I was just like, this guy's saying nothing. There's no logic in what he's saying, and then I just shut down and walked away. That's what happens. You got to be logical. And emotions, think about when you write. We're humans. We have 5 senses. Let's see if I can name them. Sight, hearing, touch, smell, taste, feeling. Did I already say that? Okay. Write in ways that appeal to, that's how we feel the world. So write in ways that try to connect with people's emotions. And recognize when your emotions are being touched by someone else's writing. All right? So when you look at a piece that you're reading, try to figure out what percentage of your response to it is based on who they are and their credibility, how logical they're being, and how they're making you feel. Sometimes the younger generation in America loves this word relatable. The older generation doesn't like it. And here's why. Some folks, if something's not relatable to them, it doesn't count. It doesn't matter. I taught a class last semester, and we were reading Slaughterhouse-Five, which was a book by Kurt Vonnegut that's about, he was a World War II soldier, and he was in Dresden, Germany, when the Allies, the Americans and the British, carpet bombed it. He was down in an underground bunker. He came up the next day, and he said the place looked like the moon. I don't know. I can't remember, bad with numbers, but 60,000 people died in one night. There was bodies everywhere, rocks everywhere. They had to dig people out of the rubble. Horrific. And this student said that the book wasn't relatable. So, I don't like it. It's not relatable. And I'm thinking to myself, well, no kidding, it's not relatable. You've never been in World War II. You've never been in a carpet bombing where 60,000 people died in one night. You've never had to then go up and clean that up. You've never had to feel what that did to you as a person. The reason why you're in college is to be around things that are not relatable to you. The point of that is to then say, huh, I don't have to agree with it necessarily, but at least I'm now me plus thinking about that. I never thought that that even happened, right? It's basically a way to become more empathetic, or to become more nuanced in ways of the world around you. So if you find yourself resisting something because it's not relatable, try to challenge yourself to allow yourself to grow and to surrender to new things. All right.